Thank you for joining us today. Our presentation is Immersive Design and Indigenous Ecology. My name is Alan and I'm with Studio Bahia. Studio Bahia is a 501c3 nonprofit where we design, develop, and deploy therapies, training, and therapeutic experiences in virtual reality. Our presentation today will be 15 minutes. It will be divided into two parts. First part would be a design philosophy. We're going to use Studio Bahia as an example on how to develop a design philosophy. The second part is Indigenous Psychology. And thank you for joining us. Design philosophy is a set of principles that establishes your value system and what a team believes is good design and why they believe it. Studio Bahia started in refugee camps. It was founded in response to children in crises, in particular children as young as 9 years old committing suicide, self-mutilation. We found in our research and visiting camps that many of the Western psychological practices, such as therapists being sent in or group therapy, did not work because people's in these settings do not have the cultural tradition of speaking to a stranger, their most intimate problems, or in group therapy they would not speak if there was a man present, or because of different socioeconomic differences between people in group therapy. But what we found inside of the camps is that people came in with a mobile phone and a bag of clothes. That's how they arrived. So we decided to try out a Google Cardboard approach. Our team is made up of Cristina, who's a VR developer and a PhD candidate, Renia, VR developer, PhD candidate. Dr. Cindy Dominique is a clinical psychologist. Eva has her PhD in VR narratives. And myself, I'm writing a dissertation on immersive design. We also have another 2 members we should include in this photo. 5 interns this summer and about 16 volunteers throughout the year, so we're a pretty big community. Our product, which we're currently manufacturing 5,000 of these headsets. Our clients are hospitals. Inside our product, we basically get a lunchbox. Inside of it, you'll find a bandana, a neck pouch, 2 paintbrushes, some paints, earphones, and a mobile VR headset. As you can see, most of these products have secondary uses, and that's purposeful so that people in refugee camps can use these products for a variety of ways. Some of the therapies that we design and develop include Blue VR as a relaxation therapy, Purple VR is using the sublime to reduce anxiety. Red VR is for people experiencing natural man-made disasters and are in shock. Azure VR is a solution-focused therapy. We also have distraction therapies such as Orange VR, Sepia VR. Yellow VR is for children to reduce the need for sedation before an MRI. Green VR is to reduce preoperative anxiety. Other therapies we have are Light VR, which is the training for natural childbirth. Rose VR is for lazy eye. Pink VR is for chronic pain. Amaranth VR is practicing CPR, learning CPR. Now we're going to describe a little bit of our process. The first step is research. When we have a therapy, a particular mental health concern, whether it's chronic insomnia, whether it's major depressive disorder, whether it's trauma, PTSD, research is the first step. That is followed by the development of concepts for use in this particular therapy. Third step is theories. This particular therapy, Purple VR, is the use of the sublime for the purposes of reducing anxiety. Once we've done that research, our fourth step is a design brief, which is about 10 to 12 pages. The fifth step is a design document, which is between 60 and 100 pages. And inside of that, we also have storyboarding and all of the research, done already to support the development of this particular therapy. Sixth step is an ecology plan. It's a little bit of part of storyboarding. From there, we move on to production. These are some examples of production. This particular one is a relaxation therapy. Then we do pilot trials and get feedback from a variety of groups. We work in a couple refugee camps. We work with urban refugees, refugee camps in Uganda, the Rhino refugee camps in Jordan, Turkey. And what we do here is we get a lot of the feedback and improve the therapies. The following step is we release it to the public. What we do is all our therapies are free. It's just a mobile app that downloads into your phone. Our mobile apps are small size actually because we consider refugees, which is our human-centered design approach. They have to walk to a Wi-Fi tower and download this particular therapy, and then they can go back to their tent and they can actually use it without Wi-Fi. There's an example of a landscape, one of our landscapes we designed. We use a lot of neuroscience findings. In this particular one, a neuroscience finding is being able to see the horizon line, which reduces anxiety. Then we do analytics, which has to do a lot with the behavior of people. If you can see on the left, there's a heat map. It tells you a lot of where most people actually move. And it helps us to address bottlenecks within the landscape. Now we're going to cover a little bit of indigenous psychology. But before we do that, a little bit of a summary of what we do as far as a philosophy of design. Studio Bahia doesn't use language, words, or numbers. All our therapies focus on embodied learning. And so our therapies are accessible to anybody in China and India, Europe, Latin America. And so that's a little bit of our design philosophy. Now we're going to discuss indigenous psychology, which is a psychological knowledge that is native, that is not transported from another region, that is designed for its people. For us, we've focused on designing something that is accessible to people all over the world. Our next stage is designing particularly for people of specific locations. Indigenous psychology is a bottom-up approach. And so as an example, we're going to cover a particular trauma that happened to the Japanese people. A disaster called the Fukushima disaster. This is a disaster that happened in 2011. And we're going to describe a little bit about the process in indigenous psychology. That is the research and then looking for solutions through an application to address a particular trauma. In this particular case, it's the collective trauma of a people, and particularly a very homogeneous society such as Japan. The Fukushima disaster can be described as something overwhelming in many ways because of the variety of qualities of it, both of being both an earthquake, tremors, water, radiation, and an absolutely shocking event for people. It can be described as something not too different from a pandemic in a way because of the radioactive quality of it, which is an enemy that's kind of invisible in a way. So first we begin with a description of how that phenomenon was felt by people and collecting that data as far as how people experience that phenomenon. Second part of that is an explanation and an understanding of regularities and why these phenomena happen, how this phenomenon happened. And so in this particular case, we have a large-scale earthquake which leads to what is a tsunami, which is a tidal wave, an ocean tidal wave that finds its way inland and in that process destroys what is a nuclear plant, releasing nuclear material throughout a whole region, including the ocean. Now, applications as far as indigenous psychology, we're going to discuss very briefly a little bit of an example of a particular therapy, a very grassroots um, approach that was found during and after the fact of this disaster. In this particular case, we have a farmer living in Japan, and this elderly farmer had lost some family members and decided to put a phone booth on his property, and he would use this phone booth to be able to talk to his dead relatives. And so this was done, he installed this phone booth prior to this natural disaster, and was, this got out after the disaster, and people started to flock to this particular phone booth. Over 10,000 people came to this phone booth to be able to talk to their dead relatives that had died during the Fukushima disaster. So this is an example of a more grassroots, more spontaneous application of an indigenous psychology therapy, but a good example of how a lot of therapies do surface in that way. Another example of applications in being able to attend to this trauma, in this sense, somewhat of a collective trauma for the Japanese people, was the development of plays by playwrights. And so plays would be able to find the language, the scenarios, the social cues for being able to discuss the subject of the loss of life, the destruction, the loss of habitat, the loss of jobs, the loss of a way of living, the impact on nature. So in this particular application, we have a scene of two different plays addressing the particular disaster in different manners. And then you have a third example of what is a tour bus, theater bus, that traveled throughout the region and performed different plays that addressed the trauma that people felt at the time. These are examples of indigenous psychology and therapies done collectively to address the trauma of the Japanese people. In a VR application, we would look at, Studio Bahia would look at hiring and partnering with Japanese anthropologists, Japanese playwrights, Japanese psychologists, sociologists, historians, therapy historians, to be able to understand the Japanese people and to have them, just equip them to develop the therapy themselves. Studio Bahia would play more of a supportive role on a technical basis based upon those of the needs of our Japanese colleagues. This is an example of how we would deploy ourselves to address the collective trauma of a nation and in creating a therapy that would address their trauma. Thank you. This is just one of many examples, but thank you for listening to us today. We welcome any of your questions, any of your thoughts. Get in touch with us. We're a nonprofit. If you have suggestions for therapies, or if you'd like to join us, we have a volunteer program. We also have an internship program. And actually, we welcome your thoughts, your ideas. And we're also a 501c3 nonprofit, so if you want to do a tax-deductible donation, you're more than welcome to. Thank you again for your time, and please have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.